I can't think of a better way to wrap up our Wednesday, April, than to have you on the Human.Social show. This is fantastic. Mitch Jackson here, everyone, with my special guest, April Shprintz. Close.
It's great.
Who is a good friend of Bob Berg. Bob's a friend of mine. That's why April's on the show. And April is a business accelerator. She's a proud veteran. Thank you for your service, April. Keynote speaker, author of the new book, Magic Blue Rocks, The Secret to Doing Anything. April and I first met over on Clubhouse in a room that Bob Berg was involved with. And that's how this came back full circle. April, it's good to see you.
Oh, it is so exciting to be here, Mitch. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. So we are broadcasting live on all the top platforms, including everyone. We are on Amazon Live, okay? So if you're on Amazon Live, unmute your audio. Definitely check out April's book, which is there or there or there or there, depending on which device you're watching the show on. We're also live on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. If Periscope's still around, we're pushing there too. And what I'd like everyone to do is send your questions in for April. We're going to talk about her book. We're going to talk about the motivation behind the book, the messages, the lessons, the approaches that she shares in her book. And I want to bring your questions into the show live. So we're going to have some fun today. Once again, the book is Magic Blue Rocks, The Secret to Doing Anything. And April, the author, is my guest. April, why don't we start off with, why did you write the book?
So it's really interesting. One of the things that has been exceedingly powerful in my life is folks who took me by the hand and believed in me and helped me realize that I could accomplish anything I wanted to. And someone shared with me that it would be exceptionally powerful, given the background that I have, if I shared those messages with other folks so that they could see that you don't have to be the smartest, the most talented, or the most anything. You simply have to believe in yourself to be able to do all of the things that you have imagined and want. And the book takes you through different stories and shares with you how you can have that belief for yourself.
I love that. It's something that oftentimes we don't learn some of these things until later on in life. I'm speaking about me, not you. And it's such a powerful tool to share these secrets and to share maybe, a little bit of your background growing up, what motivated you when you were young. And you shared a video on YouTube walking past the house that you grew up in. Mm-hmm. Would you mind if I tried to share that during our show?
No, that'd be great.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, you guys, is April shared this video on YouTube. And this is one of the fun things about StreamYard. April, I think while I'm sharing it, we're not going to be able to hear the audio. So maybe you can walk us through what we're watching. Let me hit the share button, everyone. And let's see if we can make this work. This is kind of fun. This is what I like about live video.
I love it.
And April, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to hit the play button. This is April, and you take it from here, April.
You got it. So I had gone back to Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is actually closer to Saudi Daisy. And I'd gone back to my original home. And I took this video for myself, actually. But it's amazing. This is where I grew up. That Winnebago wasn't there. And I found out from another childhood schoolmate that I was poor when I lived in that house. And the funny thing, Mitch, is I had no idea because we'd moved from the city. And I'm showing you the rocks that I eventually colored and sold at school in my first business, which is also why the book is called Magic Blue Rocks. But what was so interesting is going back there and seeing that home that as a kid, I thought was just a normal, regular home that everyone else had. And because we had so much grass and I'd grown up close to the inner city, I thought we were moving on up.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I'm glad you shared that with us, because I think a lot of us can relate to, stories, whether it's our own story or someone else, where we started and how things started doesn't necessarily mean that's where we're going to end up. Our past does not define our future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You are your possibilities, right? You're not your circumstances.
So looking through the book, I think there's 5 or 6 chapters, if I'm not mistaken. Can you share with us maybe some of your favorite stories, your favorite lessons that you mentioned in the book? And by the way, everybody, I'm getting your questions in via text. Thank you for that. Also, if you have a question, ask it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you're watching the show. We'll bring them into the show. I'll run them by April, time permitting. But, and yeah, definitely share this out, everyone. This is so much fun, April. I'm so glad that you're here. So
Thank you.
Talk to us a little bit about why you wanted to write the book, growing up a little bit. What's in the book? We grab the book, we start opening up, we start reading through it. What's the process? What's the theory? What's the approach?
So there's 6 stories, and they're from my life, and they are the lessons that I gathered and that I learned from those stories and those experiences, and hoping to share those with folks, because each one of those events was very life-changing for me. And I'm a big fan of any time that we can learn from someone else, so we don't have to get the bumps and bruises, but we can get the benefits of the lessons. And Mitch, you asked about my favorite, and they all have a special place in my heart because of the lessons that I learned. But I think my ultimate favorite is probably going to be the one that's titled Getting Out of Dodge, because as you read those stories, I could not have done more things wrong. I just couldn't have. And I couldn't have failed bigger than I did multiple times. Yet doing those things wrong and having those failures led to something that was one of the biggest blessings of my life. And a lot of times we don't know that until hindsight. But the lesson there is, if you can find a way to think about how could this be happening for me, you can much more easily recognize the things that could be the best thing ever. And it's disguised or on the heels of something that feels incredibly difficult.
How do you rewire your mind? How do you train yourself to start looking at failures as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, maybe an unexpected result as opposed to something that we did wrong?
I think there's 2 ways. One is very simple and small, and that's taking the time to appreciate the good things around you every day, whatever brings you joy and brings you pleasure. Because if you do a simple exercise, 30 seconds every day when you wake up, what do you appreciate? Whether it's the feel of your sheets or the person who's beside you or what you have planned for the day, that starts to really rewire things in your brain and get you to look at everything differently. Now, from a bigger perspective, how I encourage folks that I work with to start to look at things differently is go back in your history, because there are some amazing things that have happened to you that were literally on the heels of a huge failure or something that seemed absolutely terrible. Or if you see behind me this golf course, just months ago, it looked terrible because they were redoing it. They were making something much more beautiful. But if you didn't know the plan of where it was going, it would have just looked like a disaster. A lot of times our life is like that.
Life and business, right? It's funny how sometimes people want that end result right away. Like, how did you do that? How did you build your firm, your business, your company? But when you go back in time and you look at all of the hard work and all of the steps necessary, both good and bad, to get to that end result. So speaking of end results, talk to us a little bit about whether or not you consider having end goals, whether or not they're important or not. Okay, I think there's 2 theories to having goals. One theory is it gives you something to shoot for. Another theory is sometimes they can feel like handcuffs when we don't want to wear handcuffs, because even though our lives change, our business plans change, our interests and passions may change. It's like, but I still have to hit that goal. And that's not necessarily the goal I want anymore. Talk to us about establishing goals, maybe if your philosophy's changed over the years when setting goals, and then what do we do when our life changes and maybe we pivot and our goals change?
Sure. So I think it's interesting that you say that. I think when I was younger, I had that mindset with goals of come hell or high water, right? That goal, it's not changing. This is what I want. And as I grew and my mindset changed, I started looking at goals as iterations. This iteration of that goal, this next iteration of that goal, so that it could be flexible as I changed, as the things I wanted changed. And I think that is much more freeing. It does give you something to focus on and go towards, which I think is important. I think a lot of people find that very motivating. And the other thing that I would say about goals is people talk all the time about go take massive action towards your goals, which that's great. And that can work for a lot of folks, but I find that's not sustainable. So I think that what is not always as attractive to people is doing those consistent, sustained, smaller efforts over time, which if you're looking at someone you look up to, you mentioned Bob Berg, for example, who's done amazing things over his career. He didn't do them by leaps and bounds. He did them by consistently showing up as this wonderful person that he is day in and day out. I think people underestimate how much progress you make that way.
I always, with young lawyers building their firms, April, I always talk to them about it's kind of like if you want to start running, if you want to start getting back into shape, you can have all these goals and all these plans, right? But it comes down to lacing up your tennis shoes, leaving the front of your home and going for a walk, going for a run. And each day just a little bit further, and each day maybe a little bit harder. And over time, you'll eventually become a runner. And over time, you'll eventually start getting into shape, and it just all comes together, but it takes one step at a time. And I think too many people put too much pressure on themselves when it does come to goals. So it's interesting to hear you share your evolution of how you approach goals and how you talk about goals. A friend of mine, Jason Fried, who's the CEO and founder of Basecamp, talks about they're not into goals. They make plans about 6 weeks out. And that's about it. He's got one of the most successful companies on the planet, right? And so it's kind of a mindset. What works for me may not work for someone else watching the show. It may not work for you. But you know what works for all of us? It's your book, Magic Blue Rocks, The Secret to Doing Anything. And I want to read Bob Berg's quote about the book. Okay, Bob Berg says, "This book is a magnificent roadmap for personal and professional success. April's story is told through an entertaining, encouraging, and heart-touching autobiography, so you'll come away not only believing, but knowing that you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to." Those are Bob Berg's words. Co-author of The Go-Giver, one of my favorite people. That had to be so fun to get Bob to support your book, April.
It was amazing. Bob is an amazing person. I'd love to tell the story of how I met him, because
Please do.
Everything about who he is. So if you've read Bob and John David Mann's book, The Go-Giver, it is amazing. It is my all-time favorite book. That includes my book. His is still my favorite. And it's just life-changing about how we can really have this amazing life by giving to others. And when I read it, it was so life-changing for me that I decided to reach out to both him and John Mann on social media. The way that I tend to think, well, they'll answer. I'm the exception. Of course, they'll talk to me. They did, both of them. And they talked to everyone. And I was convinced that Bob and I should be friends. And I was willing to stalk him or do anything short of getting a restraining order if I needed to. But what was amazing is he is the person that you read in the book. He is Pindar. And he will say he isn't, but I will tell you he absolutely is. And that friendship became just such a wonderful part of my life, especially during COVID, because we live in close contact, but we were, doing Skype meetings and what have you. But what is amazing about the kind of support that someone like Bob will offer folks is those people who are always looking to uplift and help others. And there is no law of reciprocity that they're looking for. They're not giving to get. They're giving because it feels so great to them. And those people are few and far between. And he just has my heart and admiration.
How can those that have been through this past challenging, sometimes tragic 12 months, we're all living in this upside down COVID-19 world. How can we rewire our brains to have that go-giver mentality, to have that giving mentality? Are there any things that you've experienced growing up, any things that maybe you've written about in the book to help us embrace that type of philosophy, not only in business, but in life?
Absolutely. So there are so many different ways that we can take what's happened and have that help us or help others. And one that really stands out to me is in chapter 2, I talk about one true believer. And that is a businesswoman who took an interest in me when I was very young, mentored me, and to this day is still one of my best friends, 89 years old. And she's made that much of an impact. We all have that opportunity during COVID to be that person for someone. We all have different skills, different abilities, different advantages that we can share with other people and make a big difference for them. And it doesn't require more from us than our time or something that comes easily to us, but it can make a tremendous impact on others. And candidly, I feel like we should live that all the time. But I think COVID makes it even easier and almost, if you will, gives us an excuse to become more giving and come together even more closely as a group of people.
I've noticed that too, April. It seems as though the need for that is greater than ever, but also the ability for us, those of us that can do that for other people, it's easier than other, because a Zoom right now is an accepted way for you and I to communicate. I don't have to get in the car, drive an hour up to Los Angeles and have a meeting with somebody that I want to help. It's okay for us to do this over Zoom. And in the past, maybe it would have looked as though I'm trying to select the easy way out. I'm trying to, but now this is what we need to do, especially if you respect the health and safety of somebody else. Did you start to write the book before COVID hit, or did you write it during the COVID
I actually started
pandemic?
In September of this past year.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
As oddly as that might sound, to get it out into the world so quickly, but someone gave me the idea and it took shape, and I wanted to help as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. So it was a gift to me to have the time that COVID allowed to write the book. It was also a gift that there were lots of folks who contacted me from around the world asking for thoughts and advice on things that they could do for their business. And it was like everyone is a team, right? So this isn't about business, generating business. It's how can I help you? What kind of thoughts and advice can I give you? And what really impressed me, Mitch, about leaders around the world is they were looking for ways to take care of their people. And that to me was amazing, and something that I am in such support of, and was excited to offer some small bit of advice on how they could do that a little more easily.
I'm going to ask you maybe for some tips on doing just that moving forward in 2021. But before I do that, I want to give you a chance to think about this.
Okay.
I'm getting some questions. Where can we get April's book? So if you're watching this on Amazon Live, everyone, the book is right next to the video. Just tap and you can place your order. If you're watching this on the other traditional social media channels, you can pick this up at April's website. Also, where I found the book is on Amazon, Amazon.com. April, if someone would like to connect with you over on your website or blog, what's the URL for them to click?
So you can go to drivenoutcomes.com. You can also, if it's easier for you to remember, magicbluerocks.com. And the great thing is, if you're not certain about the book, you can download the first chapter in PDF and audio, and you can decide based on that if it's worth your time, because there's nothing any of you have that's more valuable than that.
But your book will help them maximize the value of their time moving forward in 2021. You guys, get the book. It's fantastic. I look at people that are recommending the book, April, and it's like, it's an impressive list of very successful people. They're like, get this book, right? And though, tips moving forward in 2021, what we've been through, this new dynamic of human interaction, human relationships, caring about our team members in big companies. What are some things we can do to effectively and appropriately move forward in 2021 to build our teams bigger, better, and stronger, but also to help the consumer to make the world a better place?
Absolutely. I love this question. So the premise of my business, and also where Magic Blue Rocks led me on that life journey, is to creating something I call the generosity culture. And that is based on 3 principles that will get you all of the success in the world, and they will help you in 2021. And those principles are pouring into your people, your clients, and your community. And it is literally as simple as that, pouring into your people by having real conversations with your team and the folks that work for you, not just about their job or what they're doing for you, but about who they are and what they want out of their life, so that you can help empower them and enrich them in their roles so that they can have even more purpose in what they do. Pouring into your clients, because we're pretty good about pouring into our prospects, right? That's like the dating process. Your clients, maybe you're at the married standpoint, right? And you want to put that spark back in that relationship. But when you pour into your clients and you really care about and listen to them, they can give you some of the most vital feedback for your business and allow you to develop things that might be your key differentiator in the marketplace and really build that loyalty and those great relationships. And last, but certainly not least, that pouring into your community. You know, a lot of the folks that we have that work for us, we want to think that they are jumping out of bed because this job that they have is their purpose in life. But it might just be a job for them that they do well. But one of the greatest ways that we can help give them purpose is to give them a way to give back to the community, whether that be through volunteering that we do as a community, as a company. We give them time to do that. We allow them outlets. But really reaching into that symbiotic relationship that we have, whether our community is local or national or global, makes an incredible foundation to continue to build your business and your life.
I love how you tap into companies encouraging their team members, their employees, to participate in their local communities. And it's like, what can we do to help enrich your experience while doing so in your community? I think that's so important right now. And the community is going to appreciate that. You know, companies that reach out and help and that are involved and legitimately care and serve from the heart, those are the companies that I want to do business with. Have you noticed in today's world, the consumer expectations, what we're watching, what we're reading, what we're observing companies doing right now is dictating who we're doing business with and why? I think it matters.
Absolutely. I know it matters to me. I will spend more for the same product or service if I think that it's making a difference in a bigger way. And I think a lot of consumers feel the exact same way.
Yeah, it's doing social good is so important. And I love it when I can support other companies that are doing that. And one reason I wanted to have you on is you and I engaged in a conversation on Clubhouse. For those of you just joining lately, I'm getting a couple of questions. How do you know April? We met on Clubhouse in a room with Bob Berg, a mutual friend. And I was so impressed by April's comments and the Q&A and her book and Bob's recommendation that I wanted to have April on the Human.Social live video show. April, talk to us a little bit about how can we embrace social digital applications like Clubhouse to move forward in the theme of those ideas that you share in your book, tapping into digital. And then using the power of digital, not just local, but national and global, right? Multiple time zones to accomplish some of these things. Maybe how you're using it or how you see some of your clients using digital.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think of digital as a couple ways. One, they're great relationship building tools, right? Mitch, you and I were on different coasts. We probably wouldn't get to interact like this if it weren't for the wonders of social media. So that can be an amazing thing. I also look at these platforms as a way to give to the folks who might be in need of the services that different folks offer, but might be the least likely to be able to invest in them at that point in time, right? So what can we give in that way? I know, Mitch, you do a lot of this with giving advice to other attorneys and other folks on building their brand and social media presence. And that is an amazing way to give to folks in the community, no matter how large you look at that community. And I think that companies that are doing that are looking for ways that they can make an impact outside of the product or service that they happen to sell are the first companies that come to mind for people and the first people that come to mind when they think, oh, so-and-so does that. Because what that can do for your brand is an amazing byproduct of doing something that makes you feel amazing anyway, which is helping others.
April, I have a question from someone who also served. And the question is, as a veteran, what did you learn while serving that you brought into your book or bringing into the business world? I think that's a great question.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So something that I think the military does better than probably any other organization is teach people how to be real, true leaders. Because a real, true leader is all about empowering their people and taking care of them. And if you talk to a military leader, it's all about, I got to take care of my soldiers. I've got to take care of my airmen, no man left behind, those sorts of things. And I took that with me into the corporate world and I think was able to build much stronger teams because in the military, it's not about any one of us as an individual. It's that all of us together are so much stronger and better as a unit.
I love that. I love that philosophy when it comes to, for example, building my law firm, but also building community on social media. One of the interesting dynamics now is taking that philosophy and being there for people. They're in your community for whatever reason. They don't have the same voice that you've got. They're shy. Maybe they're not confident about expressing their thoughts on a particular issue that everyone else is talking about. And I think we can shine a light and help these people in a way that's comfortable for them, to be heard and to have a voice. And but there's an interesting dynamics, a little bit different on social and digital than it might be for you and I in the same conference room talking strategy, dealing with because if we're in the same room with somebody, they can hold us accountable. They can walk over and take us by the arm and say, Mitch, you need to sit down. We need to talk about this. On social and digital, it's a little bit more wild, wild west. I think people feel safe, behind a keyboard and a screen on the other side of the country. Are there any dynamics, anything you've talked about in your book that maybe talk about when we're engaging on social media, when we're trying to put these philosophies and approaches together? Primarily, I'm just asking you with digital and social, some things we might want to pay attention to, whether it's empowering our team, whether it's recognizing a customer's concern, whether it's addressing a hot button social topic that everybody's talking about. And as a company, we're trying to figure out what side of the equation do we want to get on behind the social cause. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in real time right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think it's a loaded question, Mitch.
It's a convoluted question, but thanks for working with me on this.
You got it. So I would say I talk about this in chapter 1, which is so interesting because I'm 6 years old in chapter 1, but I learned this lesson really early and it still holds true to this day, which is whether I'm on social media or in person, but especially on social media, I want to focus on the things that I want, not the things that make me feel bad. So I call it pushing up against, right? So we have a lot of things that are going on in the world right now that it is a lot of our knee-jerk reaction to want to push up against. This is wrong. I don't like this. This is bad. I don't want to do this. And if that works for folks, I absolutely understand. For me, what works better is focusing on what is working, what I do want, what I'm happy to see. So if I were to put it in the context of COVID, instead of focusing on the things that we don't have and we can't do, my focus now becomes, whether I'm stating it on social media or in person, is look at what we did get. We can engage with people in a different way. People have more time in some ways than they did before to make that engagement. We are developing our empathy. So regardless of the situation that's happening in the broader world, let's focus on the things that we want to be happening instead of what we want to stop. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I love the fact that you referenced empathy. And one of the challenges that we have as trial lawyers is how are we going to go back into our court system and try our cases in a way where we need to put empathy first. We need to lead with empathy, whether it's talking to our jurors, whether it's cross-examining a hostile witness, whatever it might be. I think it's a whole new world right now. What I would have done 2 years ago, being that gunslinger hard ass on a particular issue, okay, I'm not going to do in 2 or 3 months when we get back into the courts. I'm going to approach it differently. I'm going to look at the surrounding circumstances, leading with empathy. So important. But having said that, it's easier said than done. Are there different ways, for example, that maybe either you talked about it in your book or you share when you keynote from the stage on how we can tap into empathy, how we can share our empathy with our audience, with our clients, share issues in a way where we're respecting things that are going on in their lives we may not even know about. I mean, how do we handle this? It's such a delicate way of doing business. It's such a delicate way of, I don't want to step on somebody's toes, especially when I don't know where their toes are. I can't see them. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't know what their views are on these social issues, but I also want to say something. I also want to do something. It's tough. It's hard to figure out how to go about doing it.
I think, it's a balance. And I think it requires a nimbleness and a willingness to say, I did that badly. I think it requires us to think about the fact that we are all icebergs, where what we see above the surface is such a small amount of everything that's there.
I love that.
A company that comes to mind that does this very well in their employee training, and it may seem counterintuitive, but it is Chick-fil-A. And they have a video, you can actually look for it on YouTube, that everybody has a story. And if you've ever seen it, it is amazing. It is from, older elderly people to small children. And you find out that the little girl's mother has died and her father blames her. I mean, just these backstories that you would never believe of all these people who are customers in a Chick-fil-A. And what they're doing is teaching their employees to be as kind and empathetic as possible, because you don't know what that customer is dealing with day to day. And I think if we can keep those sorts of things top of mind for ourselves, that will help us. But then also offer yourself a little grace. We're going to stick our foot in our mouth. I do it on a daily basis with the people I care about, with strangers. It doesn't matter. But I'm always quick to say, you know what? That was not my intent. However, in this situation, my intent doesn't matter, but your feelings do. So I want you to know that I apologize. That isn't what I was looking to do. And I want to come to a place of understanding. And if you've ever noticed, when people where they're having a disagreement, their hackles are raised, as soon as somebody falls on the sword, whether they were wrong or not, and it really doesn't matter when you're really trying to communicate, right? Being right doesn't matter as much as actually communicating. The wind goes out of the anger. They kind of, and I think that that's something that is really important for people to understand. And that's how I've addressed things in the current times. If someone reacts to something and it wasn't the way that I intended the message, I want to put how they're feeling and what they're experiencing before hey, that's not what I meant. Before I'm defending where I was coming from, I want them to understand that the last thing I wanted was for them to experience something badly.
So I went through this morning with my adult daughter. She's 26. She's a second-year lawyer, smarter than I'll ever be, better negotiator than I'll ever be. And what I shared with her was not, she interpreted it a certain way, and we've since worked it out. It's no big deal.
Right.
But she interpreted it a different way than what I intended. And so both of us kind of drew a line in the sand. And I held my ground, she held her ground. And what I'm hearing from you, and I should have done this morning, is I should have stopped talking and maybe immediately apologized. Tell me more about what you were saying, instead of trying to fix it, which is I was trying to do as a dad, as a business owner, and as a lawyer. I was trying to fix it like this. Instead, I should have just listened, because obviously she had something she wanted to get off her chest about what had happened, earlier that day while she was at Starbucks getting her coffee, right? And but it's easier said than done, April. I mean,
sure.
How do you do that without coming across like, if I'm dealing with another lawyer, he or she may interpret it as a sign of weakness on my part. I'm not standing up for myself. I'm not, I mean, how do you balance that?
So I think that's a misnomer, Mitch. I think that the idea that someone is being vulnerable, or they would admit that they're wrong, that we're taught that appears weak, but I think it appears strong as hell. Because how confident are you to say, you know what, I might be wrong here. Let's revisit this. Maybe I'm not understanding.
I like
because that takes a ton of confidence. And I don't think there's anything weak about that. I do think that as a society, sometimes we're told that. But to me, leaders who will share vulnerability, will share when they've made a misstep, will share when they have failed. They drive cultures of innovation, not cultures of weaklings.
Yeah, it's, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with everything you just said. But it's giving myself permission. I think some people in the audience, I'm looking at the text messages, it's giving ourselves permission to actually do that for the first time. Telling a lawyer to admit that he or she's wrong, maybe that's not what comes out of their mouth. Maybe there's another way of saying it. In other words, I think you mentioned, I might have misunderstood what you said. Tell me more.
Or help me understand your viewpoint. I love the words help me understand, because it's, I don't get what you're saying, but maybe it's because I need more information instead of you sound crazy. But help me understand your viewpoint on this. Maybe I'm missing something. And it's just gentle language. You don't have to be wrong. But at the end of the day, is that the worst thing in the world? If you're wrong? I mean, I don't know anyone who's right all the time. Now, I get attorneys are probably right more often than most folks. But having said that, I think that there's some disarming power in being willing to say, maybe you have it right. Because if you're ever, when you're trying to get a settlement done, that disarming can be what opens that door, right? Maybe I don't have all the information. Help me understand how you're seeing it this way.
And then once you ask that question, if you stop talking and start listening, you might get some new information. You might find out something you didn't know about that you can incorporate into the conversation to help everyone move towards that negotiated outcome or to help prepare for trial, whatever it might be. Great advice. I absolutely love that. And I would suggest that it's probably more important today than it was 2 years ago, especially with what we've been through in COVID, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question for you. Someone's asking, so you wrote this book after COVID had already hit. Was COVID really the deciding factor to sit down and start writing this book? Or is this something that's been on your mind for many, many years and you just got around to writing it in 2020? If you understand my question.
Great question. So I've always thought I was going to write a book or some books. It was going to be a different book than this one. Candidly, it was going to be about the generosity culture and things in business. This came about because of the video, Mitch, that you played at the top of the hour, and a boxing promoter who is a fantastic business person said, April, you need to share this story.
Now, who said this? A boxing promoter?
Like
boxing?
Yeah, boxing. A lot of the events that we see on Showtime and Fox Sports and HBO, they're his events. So he literally saw that video and said, you need to share this. Yeah. And I dedicated the book to him and to that woman who had helped me, because I don't think this book would have come out of me for years and years and years had he not said, look, people need to know that these things happen to you and where you got to, because there are other people that think they can't get to where you are because of where they're starting. Right. And so that's what led to the book. And it was really a labor of love, if you will, because I didn't know what it would turn into. And candidly, I didn't know if I could write.
Well, I mean, look, we're not born writing, and some people write better than others, but I think we all have a story within us. We all have a message, right? We've all lived different lives. And I love it when people share their experiences and they personalize the lessons that they've learned for the reader so that we can all become better human beings. Speaking of good human beings, I don't know if you know Ross Brand, but Ross Brand says hello. Ross is very well known in the live streaming community and has a lot of things going on. And everyone needs to follow Ross Brand across all the socials. He had an amazing guest on earlier today. I'm not going to try to repeat the guest's name, but is a famous musician and artist, Grammy Award winner. And so check with Ross on YouTube to check out that interview, you guys.
That's awesome.
We have some mutual friends, it looks like, who are thinking about or have been struggling with writing a book. So the question is, how do I get started? How did you get started? I can never get past pages 2 or 3, and then something else takes up my time. And before I know it, I haven't looked at the book in a couple of months. How can people sit down and write their books?
Oh, I love this. So the biggest misnomer, I think, about writing, and I didn't understand it until I went through the process, is no one's book is good at first. No one's. And some of the best writers who I've met and spoken with said this to me, and I didn't understand it until I did it. Just sit down and say, I'm going to write a bad chapter. That's the goal. You write a bad chapter, because books become amazing in the edits. It's not when you sit down and bang it out. And for those of you who did such a great job when you were in high school and college and graduate school, writing an amazing paper right off the cuff, that can seem really counterintuitive, but just write a bad chapter. And it can be a short chapter. Write a bad couple pages. And then you sit down and you revisit it. And that's when you make it better. Because I'm willing to bet that what is slowing you down after those first 3 pages is you're putting a world of expectation on how good they're going to be from the beginning. My book got really good after the 3rd edit.
After the 3rd edit, really? Wow. that's transparency right there, everyone. But I get it. I've a lot of friends that are authors, and that's the common theme is you sit down and you just get it out on paper, get it out on your word processor, right? And just keep working with it and molding it. It's almost like a piece of clay that you just keep molding until it finally ends up, like the way you want it. Did you allocate a certain number of hours a day to write your book? Did you write just when you wanted to write, or did you force yourself to have a schedule?
So I probably did this differently than some folks. And I am a person who likes to stomach things and do them all at once. Okay. So I decided to do a chapter a day until the book was done. So my first draft, I wrote over a week. I took a week and just wrote it. It's only about 140-page book, but I just did one a day, and I cleared my schedule of everything else because that's what I wanted to do. And in the spirit of transparency, I will tell you, as a former broadcaster, I'd done a lot of writing in that way, but I was so embarrassed to send my own writing to the editor that I had a former colleague from when I was in my broadcast days do the initial edit on my work before I even sent it to an editor, because as she likes to say, April, you can back into a sentence better than anyone I've ever met. So having someone that I trusted who would do an edit of even that draft made me feel better. And I share that because no one person writes a book. They have a lot of help from folks, and don't be afraid to share it with the people that you care about, that will be honest with you, because it's better than you think it is. It really is.
It's interesting how oftentimes when we live a certain story, we're used to it. We lived it. It must not have been very special. I mean, it's not special to me. This was my life, right? But then when you share that with someone else, their eyes open up and they're like, oh my goodness, you did this, or that happened to you, or why didn't you tell me about that life lesson earlier?
Right.
And I hope everyone watching today's, video, walks away with being empowered to share their story and to reach out to other people to help them, share that story with their community. I think that's kind of what it's all about. Speaking of community, I know you're a keynote speaker. I enjoy speaking. Neither one of us have been on stage for the last year. We have friends in the audience. What are your plans moving forward, 2021, 2022? Are you going to put yourself out there into the in real life speaking world again? Are you going to gravitate towards sticking with virtual presentations? I'm asking this because a lot of my friends realized that they really didn't enjoy doing all the traveling that they were doing, the keynote across the world, right? And they're like, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. How about you? What are your thoughts? What's your game plan when it comes to moving forward as a speaker?
So I will totally go back out there because I miss people. I always thought I was a hermit, but COVID taught me that I actually like being around people. So I will go back in that. But what I love is the flexibility that we've gotten, whether it's from a scheduling perspective, that it's easier for folks like Bob Berg, I think, is going to do a lot more virtually, which is great news for people who want to schedule him, because now he can speak a little more often because he's not having to do all that traveling. So people who couldn't have him before can now have better access to him. But just the flexibility of people can now do both. But I miss that interaction. I can't wait to shake hands and hug people again. I'm so excited about that. I can't stand it.
I'm with you. I miss that more so. I think I was taking it for granted. Traveling, right? People, just having lunch or going out to dinner and seeing a movie. I was taking that for granted, and I'll never do that again.
Same.
Right. So this has been an eye opener, definitely, and it's also been a true pleasure to have you on today's Human.Social live video show. Everyone, listen. I'm going to ask April one more time how we can all stay connected with her. We do have a podcast version of this, April, so people will be listening to the audio next week or next month, whenever, right? And I want to make sure, because they can't see what I'm putting on the bottom 1/3. Everyone, the book is Magic Blue Rocks, The Secret to Doing Anything. You can pick it up on Amazon. You can pick it up at April's website. You can DM me, and I'll share the links with you guys if you're out running and you can't see what we're talking about. But April, for anybody wanting to stay in touch with you, whether it's to reach out to you for your consulting services, your keynotes, speaking services, grab a copy of the book, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So you can reach out to me, of course, on social media. I am the only April Shprintz in the United States, possibly the world. So that helps. And my website is drivenoutcomes.com. And again, I'm on all of the social sites and all of my messaging is open. I am more than happy to help you.
I love that. April, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm glad our paths have crossed. Thank you, Bob Berg, for connecting the two of us. And for all of you watching today, all around the world, thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. I know it's tough right now, but do your best to try to enjoy the journey and make each day your masterpiece. April, thank you very much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Mitch. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.